I'm glad that you talked about influencer marketing because from the outside looking in, it's a very sexy, compelling concept. The idea of finding people who have large followings, who are influential, who have credibility and thought leadership in the marketplace is very attractive. And you want to associate your product with their brands and their track records. But one of the challenges is that there's a lot of competition for influencers. Lots of people want to be associated with them. And the other thing is being able to identify the influencers that are relevant to your product and as important are going to do a good job of being evangelists and advocates as opposed to simply taking your product and you simply being part of their overall influencer mix. Can you talk a little bit about Echlinville's strategy when it comes to influencer marketing? How do you identify the people that matter to you, and how do you nurture and monitor that relationship so that it's a win-win proposition?
I guess for us, that started off in our home markets, that started off in Ireland and in the UK. The whiskey community tends to be quite small in its core and quite tight knit, but very active. And like I say, it's an industry that people want to feel a part of and want to know everything about. They want to know everything about you. So the people that become influencers in your home market, you tend to identify quite quickly. You tend to know them as friends because you're meeting them. You're meeting them at tasting events. You're meeting them at whiskey shows. You're online talking about the same stuff. So that's easier. You just and like I say, the key bit to that is once they taste your product and hear your story, they're very quick. They're very quick at calling out the bullshit from the real deal. And if you're not the real deal, they will call that out very quickly, and they will not have time for you. I guess whenever you try and go to foreign markets, to far off markets, that becomes a lot more difficult. Again, we have more visibility in the US as to who's doing what. We have a bit of visibility in Canada as to who's doing what. Once you get into maybe Central Europe, maybe into regions with different languages and that type of thing, that becomes a lot harder. So you do rely then on the networks of people who know people, and you do rely on those introductions. And again, what you find is that people are not willing to make those introductions unless they have faith in you, because it's then their reputation. So I guess at that point we are relying on people we know and further out networks, and again going back to our distributor base and feeding through our distributors who are in market and who do know the lie of the land in that area.
One of the things you mentioned is the fact that, well, a lot of companies depend on digital marketing. Face to face marketing is really important. And before we jumped on this recording, you talked about the fact that you're on a multi city tour throughout North America. And I think that one of the challenges for many companies is that there's so much digital marketing being thrown at them. We're inundated with social media and content marketing and videos, and it's hard sometimes to break through. And I think a lot of brands are looking at a return to real world marketing, going to conferences, going to events, hosting dinners or master classes like you did in Toronto yesterday. And I'm curious about your approach and your company's approach to physical marketing, in which you're making relationships and you're meeting people and you're building your network and you're building word of mouth and actually getting people to experience the product and tell stories about the product. Is that a key part of your marketing thrust?
It's at the very core of it, in that, like you say, the online is a very noisy place. You're being constantly bombarded with messages from 100 different brands in any one day, in any one field. The human nature, we tend to just learn to block that out. It becomes, it doesn't register with you. You can have online marketing thrown at you all day, every day, and very little of it will actually register with you. So what you have to do, you have to make that register with people. And you have to make them aware of Dunvilles before I make them aware of something about Dunvilles, and then the online marketing starts to register with them. We find the best way to do that is just to get into market, to get into bars, to get into whiskey shows, to get into consumer events. There's nothing. I mean, whiskey is a different industry, Mark. Whiskey is about, in its very essence and its very heart, whiskey is about me pouring you a glass. We sit down and we share a story, and that is what whiskey is not about pouring 8 whiskeys and getting whatever. Whiskey is about sitting down with friends, pouring a glass, and sitting telling a story. That lends itself very well to consumer events. I can sit and pour people 3 or 4 whiskeys. I can tell them the story of our distillery. I can ask them what they like, why they like it, what resonates and doesn't resonate with them, and form those connections. Once you do that, the the rest of the marketing starts to resonate with them. It gets through their filters, and it registers with them. So the job of the consumer events, of the face-to-face tastings, of having a chat over a whiskey, it's to break down the filters so as the rest of your message gets through to them, if that makes sense.